So yeah, so Franklin Rosemont, if you don't know who he is, a famous American surrealist, very good writer. One of his greatest books is Sorry, Wrong Numbers. And he was also connected to the Fifth Estate, Freddie Perlman, the group of anarchists that appeared in the 60s and 70s. Freddie Perlman being the first translator, to my knowledge, of Guy Debord's The Society of the Spectacle. So anyway, Franklin lived in Chicago. I think I told you my first encounter with him. I was a assistant manager at a bookstore on Wells Street in Chicago in the 70s. And Franklin Roosevelt would come in with Penelope, his wife, to the bookstore, and they just start taking books off the shelves and putting them in their bags. And then they'd say, "Good to see you," and then they'd walk out, right? And this was a routine about once a month. And this is back when they had all kinds of good books on the shelves. So I would always anticipate in my own case when Franklin might be coming to take the books that I wanted before he would get there, what he might choose. But anyway, unfortunately, he passed away about 7 or 8 9 years ago. He has a book on surrealism, on American surrealism, and it's very well known, real character. Chicago had the Kerr publishing house as well as it
Mhm.
still do, I think, and also a very strong labor city. So Franklin was extremely well connected to the working class movements in Chicago's and union movements too. So anyway, he left a manuscript, which is in the hands of a friend of mine, John Clark in New Orleans, who Caroline knows, and Jeremy actually spent some time with John in New Orleans. He left a manuscript that Penelope sent to John Clark about an imaginary, and I don't know how imaginary it is because there is some facticity to this, that Lafitte met Frederick Engels in Manchester, and he became good friends with Engels. And supposedly he provided the seed capital for the publication of the manifesto of the Communist Party. Very much a friend to the working man. And and Hegel, in his way, even before Marx, but a lot of Marxist interpretations of Hegel, in terms of the early formation of the proletariat, is that the pirate was the, first proletariat, the first thief against capital. So this is a kind of interesting subject matter that can, be broadened out both in narrative form and I think also in analytical form. I think this book is trying to talk about that care is really insurgency. It's not only
Mhm.
power, but it's the power of insurgency and the power of an organized resistance, right? In a sense that, that people, the vulnerable, those have been abandoned, right, in many ways, are now, basically without care, and care is being provided. But this care being provided is being criminalized, very much like, the help in neighborhoods, around the ice, this tragedy in Minnesota, and more to come. It's just a matter of time. New York City,
Mhm.
to my mind, and elsewhere, Portland, many communities, etc. So we will see. But so anyway, this thing about the pirate to me is very special for that reason, as well as growing up Greek in a household that, you know, there was some fixation early on, or at least some kind of combinations on my mother's side of the family, with the so-called Greek pirates, the Nearchoses, the Onassuses, and many other families, etc. And I heard stories of parties, where people would just say, that person has 100 ships, that person has 50 ships. So you see
Mhm.
the other side of this against the pirates, but called pirates by the bourgeois press. So you have the irony of this term, that Onassis, Niarchos, Goulandris, there are many families involved, Lemos, etc. Lemos was a man of the people. billionaire, but he liked riding bicycles. And when he came to New Orleans, he rode around City Park, right? That's all he wanted to do is ride the bicycle around the city. So it's kind of interesting. So for me, and then I remember once when I went to New York and my family had a friend who was one of the managing partners and head of the New York offices for one of the ship owning families. And they said, well, why don't you contact him? He'll know good restaurants to go to. And I was trying to impress my girlfriend, of course, at this time. I think I'm all of 20 years old, going to go to a fancy Greek restaurant on the West Side. And the restaurant was called Mykonos and it had a floor show. And he told me about it. But I always remember going to this guy's office, and this gives you an idea of world piracy and this whole thing about who controls the sea that goes back to Carl Schmitt, on land, sea, and the nomos of the earth. He had a huge map of the globe, and at this time when I was there, this is how old I am, was the 1967 war in Israel, right? The first of the major conflicts post World War II, of which was, an item, the Moshe Dayan, moment, et cetera, et cetera. And they had the positioning of the ships in their fleets, right? And they're all sitting around South Africa. And he and I see what's happening here. Yeah. I asked him, I said, well, what's going on with the war? And says, it's very profitable. Rewrite ships, and we make much more money, during these conflicts in a sense because we have to rewrite around the Cape of Good Horn and other ways, other routes, shipping routes. So it gives you an idea of how much of this is very much interconnected. I mean, this really stuck with me. I mean, the restaurant was great. He picked up the tab, thank goodness. I would have been broke for about 6 months, floor show in a Greek restaurant on the Upper West Side. But anyway, so that's another relation to the pirate class, and of course the Greek islands. Everybody, the Greek ship owners, in their sense, always had to have their own islands. That's another thing of the major ship owners, right? Now, the interesting thing today, and most of you probably know this, is that Piraeus, which is the port of Athens, and also the site of the Republic, by the way, that's where it takes place, is now run and managed and owned somewhat by the Chinese. Doing a damn good job, by the way, at least in my mind. So this has happened ever since the Troika problems of the Greek controversy, with the owing the euro and the eurozone all the money back in the day, right? And away. And by the way, this guy Paul Singer, who stands to make a lot of money in Venezuela, hedge fund manager, also made a lot of money at that time on the Greek debt. So he also made money buying up the debt on 5 cents on the dollar. Yeah. So, which they get paid back at 20 to 30% on the dollar. Yeah, just like his taking over of Citgo. So I'm trying to build the case here that piracy, from our standpoint and from what goes on, is completely justified in some ways, in a way. And I find it very interesting, even though this notion of pirate care is not really about hitting the ships on the high seas, right? Taking them over. This is about basically transport. I think they use three different examples. One, of course, is what was it called? The Sea Watch, right? Then the flotilla, and also the women on waves, right? This was the other one, right? So they had the three case studies of women pirates, right? Again, I'm very interested in women pirates. I was mentioned the book last week. I have a copy of it here. It's actually very good. It's on the Jolly Roger and women pirates. This is the book here. It's called Women Pirates and the Politics of the Jolly Roger, and it's Ulrika Klossman and Marian Mezerin Some very radical people. There's a very, very interesting, galley humor here. The China Sea, it begins with the China Sea, etc. So, I mean, I recommend this. It's a very easy
Mm,
read. It's not, overtly or really in that matter philosophical, but very interesting. The last chapter is the life under the death's head, in a way. And I'm teaching, speaking of, again, piracy in the seas and revolts and insurgency. I'm teaching Benito Cereno in about 5 weeks, the great piece by Melville, which was taken from Arthur Delancey's archives. Arthur Delano, I'm sorry, it was the archives that Melville was studying and made into the short story, the novella Benito Cereno. I don't know if you know that about the mutiny and the uprising on the ship by the black slaves, led by Babo. And it's a very interesting stuff that he had the razor always to the master's throat, right? Ultimately. Very, very interesting. And there's a very interesting reflection about memory and the sea, and reminds me of Nietzsche. They have no memory, right?
mm,
Yeah, in a certain way. Very interesting. Like the sea, there is no memory. So anyway, there's a lot to work with here. I don't know. How did you find the read? I know I just sent it out today. I mean, we can certainly pick it up, more in detail later. But just any kind of reactions, and have you heard of these women? These are women mostly, that are involved
mm, mm.
in the moment, that are taking these risks, right? Big time risks, right? Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. And Phil, you know about this, right? Sure, in a way.
Yeah, no, I had heard about the woman who was rescuing people in the Mediterranean
Right,
and and bringing them in to port, and
right.
how she was arrested, and I think she lost her boat. She knew she was going to lose it,
Right.
but you know, I think that's the one I definitely there was a guy many years ago in New York that showed a film on people being rescued in the Mediterranean,
Uh-huh.
and she was featured in it.
Right. Peter Bratsis and I did a show. Oh boy, it was a long time ago. I think around 2017, 16 or 16, I think it was, after the Syrian refugee crisis, which is still obviously going on, but
Mm,
at its high
mm,
point. And we actually interviewed two journalists from England, and did a very good discussion about the island of Lesbos. Right. And very much of this kind of piracy that went on, and people being taken in Lesbos. Lesbos was a point of very openness, interesting enough that the poet Sappho comes from that island, right? Lyric poetry was sort of
mhm,
built there, on the island of Lesbos, and that today it became a kind of center for this Mediterranean refuge, right? And the
mhm.
ability to take in, those without home, the real homeless of the world, right? And the migrants, of course. I just wanted to mention a couple of things. One about the author that's interesting. Tomislav Medic, one of the authors, has created a private library called the Peer-to-Peer Pirate Library, in which, you can get books and hack, at any point, and there's a sharing of kind of documentation all the time. So these people are pretty well organized in terms of resistance going forward. Again, this whole question, is this kind of pirate care a new form of agency that we could take up, going forward? We had last week, talking about care as power. And this is care really as insurgency, care as, the agency to overturn certain structures. So this to me is kind of the interesting thematic about this. But anyway, yeah. I mean, I knew literal pirates in Louisiana because, a lot of sabotage was taking place on terms of oil boats, shrimp boats, right, et cetera, et cetera. So you had this kind of culture that was built in, of this, but nothing like this. This was about profit. The pirate as being the thief, right,
Mhm.
instead of the pirate as an organized insurgent. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think the flotillas that to Gaza were a perfect example of
yeah.
piracy.
Mm.
I agree with you and how they were criminalized. See, the
Oh yeah,
interesting part here of this book to me is how an act of concern, an act of care, an act of compassion becomes criminalized.
Yeah.
It's really amazing how this is overturned, right? In a way. Yeah, yeah, yeah. How what organized abandonment is, right, in a way, displacement of people in need, and this empathy and compassion for these people are overturned into criminalization. We've
Mm.
seen this in UNRWA. Not that I'm a big fan of UNRWA, right, in another way, but again, you see how these things become criminalized immediately by
Yeah.
those who are, in control of this shipment of bodies, right? In a sense. And I'm surprised that nobody, maybe Jeremy can help me with this, but I'm surprised that no one has done some kind of connections here to the slave trade, right? How this is working too. What happens to these bodies? What happens to these migrants, et cetera? I told you the story that I'm sitting in Athens, right, during the time of the Syriza, defeat, if you will, capitulation, the no vote. And, a Syrian child came up to me, he and his sister, excuse me, the sister was older and the younger brother, and said, my mother says you can buy us. Yeah. Yeah, essentially with a for sale sign on their body. So you have to think about this. What is actually going on with this? Are these new forms of slave labor? What is really actually happening here? Yeah, yeah, in some ways. And Jeremy, do you know of any writing about this that puts this in terms of new forms of slavery and any kind of relation back to earlier stuff? I mean, yeah. Are you with us or he's maybe away? Okay. Well, anyway. Um, yeah. I know the Hydra-headed monster. Yeah. Yeah. Phil, you want? Yeah.
yeah. I mean I don't know of anything written,
Yeah.
but I think the stuff that's like the slavery going on now, the slave markets in Libya, I think are an example of how the the empire's destruction of that country has, resulted in a return to slavery.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. People forget that Gaddafi was the one who made the deal with Arm and Hammer to get oil production and oil profits put back into the system. People forget this about Colonel Gaddafi, how what a radical move that was in the Middle East and where how it did go back into schools and a certain openness. Again, there are problems with all of this, but Arm& Hammer, by the way, was the only person to get in every regime in the Kremlin. Open door.
Mhm.
Very close to Vladimir Lenin in the beginning, and ever since, right? Yeah, it goes to show you the head of Occidental Petroleum. But back when he had access to the Kremlin in the beginning, he was in the pharmaceutical business. Yeah, and yeah. So anyway,
Yeah, I think Gaddafi was the process of setting up an exchange situation for development, I think in North Africa.
yes,
And that's the reason why Madam Clinton
Mm.
took her out,
yes, yes,
Right. He was going to set up a financial system in Africa, actually,
Yeah, yeah.
that was based on gold and backed by gold, but that would take oil out of the exclusive
The hegemony of the U.S. dollar.
hegemony of the dollar. Yeah.
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 Sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's still happening today. He's not as
Yeah.
attractive, Nicolas Maduro. I had a woman friend who used to say if Arafat looked like Gaddafi, the Palestinians would have had multiple states. It was kind of funny back in the day. Yeah, yeah. The Gaddafi had that kind of appeal. I don't know if anybody saw the interview. Again, I'm reminiscing, but with Barbara Walters, how he played her completely. It was very funny back in the 70s. Barbara Walters got an interview with Gaddafi, and he knew every move the American media would make next in terms of the interviewing process. Very intelligent man, in my opinion. And again, another kind of disaster and typical kind of scapegoating, humanization that goes
Mhm.
on. And the same kind of treatment. I mean, we see this criminalization before any kind of court, in a sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I am disgusted. I mean, look, I'll use the U.S. passport, but I am really disgusted to be a citizen of this idiocy. I mean, really, in a sense, that you see Celia Flores,
Mhm.
with marks on her face. She was beaten. She was hit. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, this is insufferable. And then today I hear that Christy Noem, I mean, there is a move to impeach her. Whether or not it's going to be successful or not is another story. But she said that for every agent killed, right, everybody else will pay, right?
Woo.
Yeah, for every one they kill of us, everybody else on the other side will be, executed, essentially. Yeah. So, we're getting this out of the mouth of people that are, basically in very high positions in government that you'd expect out of the mouth, and they weren't that stupid. Goring and,
Mhm.
Eichmann and, Hess and these people, right? Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, yeah, yeah. So anyway,
Yeah, and
very,
I
very
think
real.
we're about to also go to war, against Iran, and
Mm.
on the basis of human rights.
Yeah.
Right.
We're gonna save them from themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe Pedro's got the right idea. He's going to go to war on behalf of animal rights. Beware the jaguar. Huh? Right. That'd be nice. Yeah. On the other hand. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, did you get a chance to look at this? I mean, I'm sorry about the delay in getting it out. I think it's very readable. It's very
Mm.
interesting. Really up to you if you want to discuss it at length. I do want to make a couple of more sessions, or at least one full session on Stiegler to kind of come back full circle from Heidegger, Stiegler to Kitte's, and look at care both as conscience, right? Care as responsibility, called to being, etc. Obviously, taking care of generations in Stiegler's sense, and how to go back to that in these three crucial concepts. Did I send the bifurcation text to you? I mean, we're not going to
I
read
think so.
it. No, I didn't. Okay, I'll
I
send you
think
the
so.
bifurcation text. That's the latest, I think, published work of Stiegler, the late work. This concept, and again, thank you to Patrick for exomatization, right, which was an essay he gave to explain that in many ways. I like this sense of proletarianization. A lot of people don't like it on the left, but I do like it in the sense that he's thinking about the generalized proletarianization of everybody, that not only are we de-skilled, but we really are forgetting to be how to live as well, right?
Mm.
We really are proletariatized in many ways, with only quote unquote but the labor of the body to sell, right? In some ways, we're beginning to see this more and more, and yeah, and then of course the concept that maybe we can look at bifurcation. I think there's some people who have problems with the notion of the pharmacon and they think it's anti-dialectically. I don't really think so, but I'll have that argument when I engage it a little more because I think it's yeah. I mean in some ways when you really think about what is the pharmacon in a way, it's a double edge, always working, a double reading, a dopal reading always happening simultaneously. And I'm always remember this quote from the brothers Karamazov when Ivan Karamazov goes on trial. Uh, remember, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this main man can see both points of view simultaneously. This is what we're dealing with. So this is to me part of maybe a characterization we could talk about in terms of the pharmacon going back around to remedy and poison. I know it's not that new, right? And I know it has to do with writing and speech in some ways too, in terms of the Derridian movement of the Plato's pharmacy. But at the same time, I think it's very, very important, very important concept to look at as a methodological tool, if you will, right? And it's something that is very important, for us to go forward with. So I mean, that's what I'd like to do. I've been setting up. I mean, Jeremy will be there in Cassos, but I've been trying to set up the question. I'm going to do the section on the desire called revolution, the question of desire and revolution from from Lacan to the anti-Oedipus group in Cassos. But I'll build towards that with the next group of sessions here, to go forward, in that regard. And yeah. I do want to recommend one book that's I think still very important. It's expensive, unfortunately, but maybe we can find through the pirate library or the Russian, whatever, a copy in PDF. Existential Psychotherapy by Irvin Yalom. And I think this is a very crucial book because what it does therapeutically is to begin to have the patient think about, because I'm really trying to say we need a therapeutic community. One of the reasons I like this notion of the pharmacon and the therapeutic in multiple senses of the word. But how do we in some ways get back to people being aware that they have choice, right? And that they are choosing in their daily lives. How could this actually help form agency? And unfortunately, in the Freudian corpus, and even in the Lacanian, these are issues never really addressed, which, the Sartrean existential Dasein analysis group had much to do with, which was a very interesting, other text that's going on. Ludwig Bigswager, Medard Boss, Rollo May in a more superficial way, but in a good way. He was one of the interlocutors. So I think this is, again, another anecdote that's very important that we need to address is this whole problem of choice. We're really very overdetermined by the ideology of economic and political determinism right now. I think this has become an ideology both on left and right, and we need to kind of break that hold again, that kind of enfrainment, in many ways. Yeah. So
Who's the author of that book?
Yalom, Yalom, Irvin
Yeah.
Irvin Yalom. Yeah, he really a wonderful human being, right? He wrote the
Yes.
textbook on which most group psychotherapy is practiced. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he ended up at Stanford. He was at Johns Hopkins for a while, doing his practice there. Wrote a book on Nietzsche and one on
Nietzsche
Spinoza.
and also on Spinoza.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So two again favorite philosophers of mine. So yeah, I mean I'm very much with him here in many ways. Yeah. So very very important going forward. So so this notion of criminalization, we see it in everyday life. I mean, this is what the Trump administration is trying to do. This is, of course, what the Nazi regime did. And I think this is a term we need to go back to. It's not only the Kirchheimer and the essays, the class that was given on crime and punishment at Columbia by the group of representatives from the Frankfurt School in the 30s, and Foucault's response to that in Discipline and Punish, etc., in terms of how these things work, but really how criminalization works in the society and demonization. I think this is very, very crucial going forward because this is not only what happens in the McCarthy period, but now it's being weaponized at every stage of the way, right? Every step of the way. Yeah. The criminal class is not the actual criminal class of mafia capitalism. And Peter Bratzus got angry. I put mafia capitalism in a blurb for one of the courses. He said, don't dignify Trump and company or these people with the mafia. And I'm going, okay, you can take it out. It's all right. But anyway, again, the question is, go back to Bob Dylan, the great line in Reuben Carter, millionaires in their coats and ties drink martinis till the sunrise. They're the real criminals, not you and I. So anyway, how is this inverted, topsy-turvy world taking place, and how is it affecting everyday life and people's psyches too? How does this affect psychic and collective individuation, since we talked a lot about this last week? So I think this is, again, something very important to confront all the time. I mean, Maduro, for example, right? Who was basically the son of a bus driver, right? A Chavez, clone, if you will, a right-hand man, if you want to look at it that way, etc. Delcy Rodriguez has much more of a connection to the Chavista and the left movement, who's now the president, etc. But he's fully criminalized, right? How did they do this? He's a narco-terrorist, right?
Yeah.
So many ways. Yeah. And these are obvious things, but things we forget because it's going on in our own backyards now, too. This person is a domestic terrorist. This is coming from the Homeland Security. How do we get to this language of domestic terrorism? And maybe one way of narrativizing this, in a symbolic way, is to go back to 9/11 and post 9/11 thinking that this kind of changed in so many ways, that this notion of the terrorist, right,
Yeah.
the domestic terrorism switched heavily at this point, right? And people no longer saw the state as terror, right? And because, the double reading of Hegel is always the state is terror. Yeah. And yeah. So Have you seen the movie Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion? Anybody? This Italian movie? It's a great film. You have, Patrick? Yeah.
Great film.
Great film about a policeman who actually commits a crime and gives all the clues toward him, but nobody believes that he possibly could be involved, right? It's a great film about this.
He murders his mistress.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's a great opening. Isn't it a great opening scene? Yeah.
And they blame the guy, the leftist, I think, for it.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Bring it up. Yeah.
This was the film was made during the hot autumn in Italy, I think, and so it was obviously
It was
very
made
correct.
right after the hot autumn. That's correct.
Yeah,
In the early 70s. That's right. Right. Yeah. There were great films that came out of Italy from that.
I think it's on Criterion, I think.
It is. Yeah. People who want to see it, it's really worth watching and studying. Also, speaking of Criterion, I'm sorry, I'm kind of all over the place. I've been like this all
It's the snow that does it.
and all that adrenaline and the muscles here. Yeah, anyway, to go back for a second to Criterion Channel, there is a wonderful series from China called,
Yes,
Blossom Sang.
I'm watching it.
It's good, isn't it?
It actually it's good because it concretizes the kind of the transition that took place in terms of introduction of market relations and the stock market and everything else. Yeah. He also does good love stories.
Well,
But
yeah,
those are
Music for Love is
those are other ones anyway.
yeah,
But
yeah,
this is
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I mean, it's a masterpiece. But
yeah.
he's one of the great stylized directors. I mean,
Oh yeah.
he's a master at this. This is War Kai Wai. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Who was born in Shanghai but moved to Hong Kong.
Mm.
He moved
What was
to
the name of the series again?
It's called Blossoms Shanghai.
Yeah.
Right.
The blossoms, of course, the cherry blossoms in
Mm.
Shanghai, but also the blossoms of the financial,
Yeah.
bonanza that was happening in the early 90s with the formation of the Shanghai Stock Exchange, which is today obviously a matter of fact, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, very, very well done. I think it's 22 episodes are out right now. There's
Hmm.
60 episodes, but 22 have been now distributed. Of course, it's in Chinese with subtitles. Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
Okay.
yeah. But incredibly well. I think the stylized part of it is pretty amazing. And there are three crucial women characters and three crucial men characters throughout, at least in the beginning. And the uncle, of course, is the mastermind. He reminded me of Dr. Mabusa from the Fritz Lang,
Yeah.
Mabusa the gambler. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so very, very interesting film on, yes, as Patrick put it, the transition to market relations and market economy in China in the 90s in particular. Yeah, and the beginning of the formation of their stock exchange. Didn't take them long, you know?
No.
No.
It didn't take them long. Very, very much faster than Wall Street in many ways. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I'd like to. I mean, hear for any thoughts about this notion of pirate care. As and the projects. I mean, I just put this in. To be read as another way of looking at care in a double way, the withholding of care by the state, right?
Mm.
And the
Mm.
abandonment of people in need, the vulnerable,
Mm.
and then how it's criminalized when people try to give care. This is
Yeah.
the great ambiguity here. Yeah, Beryl, please. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a sort of a small micro example going on here,
No,
which is that actually the state, that sort of triad of care, the state, the market, and the family,
right,
which they talk about here, the state here is actually withdrawing from
right,
care and putting it all onto the market. And
right,
one of the areas that they're doing this in is in public housing. They've
right,
basically, in the 50s, there were these massive developments of, 20-story public housing blocks.
right,
The state government, it's a Labour government, decided that they needed what they called renewal. And this renewal involves handing the land over to private developers, pulling down all these, there are whole communities who've lived in these towers for generations. They're going to pull them down and they're going to put up private so-called community housing, which
right,
will be
right,
organized through things like church groups and so on. Anyway, there are groups that have tried to block this out
hmm,
of care of the people who live in these places.
right.
And of course, they are continuously being criminalized. And
It's
the same thing, the stuff that I read this morning in this book is very resonant of what's happened with refugee care here.
right.
Like we've actually in some ways provided the model for the UK and Europe on how to deal with so-called illegal migration, which is that you take them into custody and then you put them in some subordinate place. In our case, it's been Papua New Guinea or Nauru in the Pacific. The UK has been trying, I think, Rwanda. Um, and that whole idea that blocking the care of refugees is a way of saving them because there were so many accidents as boats tried to land on the Australian coast. So we had to stop that. We brought in the Navy, we arrested people, and we transfer them to basically detention camps in other countries. And it's absolutely according to this particular codeway. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I play Godard here in the penal colony, both
Yeah,
Kafka and the
absolutely.
actual moment here in many ways. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And people
Yeah.
forget to read Kafka when they read Foucault and the things that
Yeah.
you're presenting.
Kind of
Yeah.
replicates the history of Australia, because
Oh,
Australia
absolutely.
was a
Yes.
penal colony.
Yes.
You know,
Indeed. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. It seems it's like it's well, like the weaponization of human rights now
Mm.
has become a real thing. You know, we're blowing the hell out of we blew for 20 years we blew the hell out of Afghanistan to save
To
Afghan
save
women.
people. Yes.
I think the great joke on Afghanistan is we went to remove the Taliban, and 23 years later, they're put back in power, even more powerful than they were
More
when we
powerful
tried
than
to
ever
remove
before.
them,
Yeah.
right? In many ways, right, right, yeah, and
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
but we're about to blow the hell out of Iran
Iran.
to save the Iranians.
Mm. Mm.
Right. Yeah.
No, and the crazy thing about it is there are so many people on the left here who sign on to that. You know that, oh, these people's human rights are being violated, so we
So
have to.
we'll kill them instead.
Yeah, yeah. Let's just
Bring
blow
back
them
Sadak.
until
Bring
they're
back
in.
Just blow them up.
Yeah. Where's the Shaw when we need him? Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, people forget that, in 78, there was a very good possibility of Iran going Marxist.
Yeah.
The people forget this very actively.
Mm.
And
Mm.
one could say that very strange possibility could have been that the Khomeini government was put in there in some ways to build not only the anti-Soviet moment, right, and the beginning of the Mujahideen, but also to block any possibility of a leftist takeover. Yeah, and this was done by the West. This was not
Mm.
just internal to them. Yeah, yeah, and set up. So yeah.
Well, it's like how we supported Wahhabism in
Mm.
the Arabia. Same deal.
Absolutely. Yeah. Still do. Right. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. 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 Right. So anyway, any other thoughts? Again, I'm sorry, this is a loose text. It has
Mm.
a lot of empirical stuff in it. I mean, did anything strike you or sentences in it? Again, for me, it's really the challenge of is put out that there is an organized abandonment, right?
Mm.
People in
Mm.
need that is really
Yeah.
going on constantly. I think this is the real takeaway in a
Mm.
sense, and that the organization to show care, empathy, and some kind of practice in a way becomes criminalized, even
Yeah.
though the real criminality is the abandonment to begin with.
Mm.
It has
Mm.
nothing to do with human rights or whatever.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, in a way. And, I think you're right, Phil, when you bring up the Libyan slave market, et cetera. And just a matter of time, that you see this more and more in throughout the wars in the Middle East. And, yeah, yeah. So this is, again, um, very significant. Again, I mean, I also see these people. I mean, the woman pirates, if you will, or
Mm.
woman, if you, I mean, again, we have to be careful with that term, but these women that have been criminalized for actually working on these ships, the sea. Seaward project, the Seawater project, the Woman on Waves, and the Flotilla
Mm.
projects are all, really in a way, heroines, right? In so many ways that these are characters that we don't really talk about on the
Mm.
left and really engage in an active way. Yeah. And very important because in a way they're part of a resistance that's very,
Mm.
very significant to me. It's really part of an overall resistance. So again, yeah, very, very important. Yeah. I mean, the authors are Croatian. It's kind of interesting that they came out of Croatia, most of the people.
Mm.
I'm not sure about yeah, Medak is a Croatian, right? And as is Mars. I think the other person too. So yeah. So again, very, very interesting here and how Beryl relates this to housing care, elderly care could be also put
Mm.
in this.
Mm.
That's the abandonment, what is going on there too, and what are their, moments of, intervention on that basis. Um, uh, so kind of funny, yeah, to think about this in terms of everything that a lot of us face here, right? Right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, and the notion of blockades too. Yeah,
Mm.
how that is also in sanctions and how that's working globally. So to me, again, this is a very important part of what's going on. I just wanted to see if yeah, there's a whole section in Women Pirates, the Golden Age of Piracy in the Caribbean. So in the Women Pirates too. So this is a very interesting little book. It's about story, right? And how one tells the story of the pirate. Very, very important in that way. Yeah. But again, I like the Jean Lafitte. I hope, there was a movie made on him starring Yul Brynner on Jean Lafitte, the life of Jean Lafitte. And Barataria, where he lived in the bayou, was Cajun language for bargain land because you could go to Barataria, you'd get the bargains from the pirates. They helped
Oh.
everyday inflation. It's kind of interesting, right? And that's what we should be thinking about too, in terms of our own kitchens, our own
Mm.
interventions too. Where's the bargain land? How do we engage this in terms of the age of inflation, right? How do we deflate inflation through these kind of tactics and strategies? So anyway, yeah, yeah,
Speaking of films, Michael,
yeah.
one of my favorite films as a child was called Anne of the Indies. And
Oh
it
yeah.
starred, I think, Jean Peters. And I presume it was made based on Anne Bonny.
Yes.
Um, and I
But
I had a sword made and climbed up a ladder, which was the rigging. I played
that's
this
fantastic. Yeah,
a
yeah.
very long time.
I think that was the only woman that Howard Hughes actually loved.
Uh,
I'm sorry, I had to throw that in. But anyway, yeah. I don't know if you know Pick Up on South Street. Do you know that
yeah,
beginning with Richard Widmark? She's
yeah,
fantastic in that film. The unwitting character, but this pickpocket that's going on in that sequence. It's amazing. Yeah.
yeah,
Amazing opening sequence, even though the ideology of the film is very skewed.
yeah,
But anyway, yeah, yeah. Gene Peters, yeah. What a
yeah.
great, great, yeah, name from the past. Yeah. Pre Jane
Well,
Russell.
I'm even older than you, Michael. So
No, I got it. No, I love Gene Peters. Bro. I mean, I thought, yeah, 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 yeah. Right. But before Jane Russell, yeah,
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 for the outlaw. Right.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a person completely forgotten in terms of the power that he had and the genius in some ways.
Mm.
The Hughes Tool Company and the Hughes relationship to Hollywood, again, not really brought up anymore. We're all fixated on Musk and Zuckerberg
Mm.
and all, Alex Karp and what's this other idiot, Sam Altman, all these kind of tech bros. They're nothing compared to Hughes. These people were, I mean, Hughes was a man, he was a savant, right?
Huh.
Yes, yeah, I think, yeah, 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 yeah. I miss the Pan Am. Some of you have lived in New York. Jeremy, do you remember as a kid the Pan Am building?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, 42nd Street. You saw
Yeah, yeah.
that's
Go there with my dad.
yeah. That's where the helicopter came in for Putney Swope. The opening of Putney
Yeah.
Swope was at the top of
You know,
the Pan Am building, right?
this is really silly, but I wanted to tell you guys. So, my friend is a filmmaker and he's a rapper and he's from Oakland, but he grew up in Detroit, where some of my family's from. And when you see him dance on TV, like when at his shows and stuff, he does these hand gestures, and I was like, "What the hell is this?" And then I saw a bunch of the gangs in Detroit doing the same kind of hand gestures. He's like, "You don't know that dance? It's called the Errol Flynn." So apparently, like when Errol Flynn would parry, in the old movies, I've seen Errol Flynn since a kid, but I didn't notice this until I rewatched it. And so a bunch of like predominantly like African American like street organizations in the 80s and maybe late 70s in Detroit took this on, and this was part of their kind of pageantry where they're doing this dance called the Errol Flynn. So I thought it was like an interesting pirate connection, mediated through a bunch of Hollywood
Well,
apparatus.
if you play with that, you could take the Errol, Erroll, Errol Flynn, who was actually went to school, I think, in the Bronx, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, you could take that and just change it to Arrow, Arrow, Flynn, in terms
Yeah.
of language. It would give it a more weaponized notion,
Mm.
of what's going on.
Well,
But
it
Flynn was
preceded the
like,
Crip Walk and all of the, the contemporary, like the 90s stuff.
sure,
Like
sure.
back in the day, it was the Errol Flynn, and this was the
Yeah, no,
dance.
I got it. I got it. Yeah, yeah. Cool, cool. Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah. Well, we need to make good movies again. Yeah, because they're
Yeah.
at least they're making them in China. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really recommend this Blossom Shanghai. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Check
mean,
it out.
I think it's a very interesting attempt to do it. Yeah.
Michael,
Slow
you're not
horses.
watching it on DVD, are you? Or are you watching it
Oh,
online?
I have it on Criterion.
Oh, okay.
You can get it on Criterion.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, you get the fundamentals in the first 3 or 4 episodes. So that's about 2 hours and 15 minutes of viewing time. Yeah, it's like going to one feature length film. Yeah, you get really the characters, how it's shaping out, and then you're kind of, you're hooked, right? And then you're gonna binging, and then you wait till the executives make the decision. We got 22 episodes. Now we got to add 3 more to keep our market, and they'll get up to the 60. I think they're releasing 3 a month, Patrick. I think that's
Okay.
the thing with Criterion on this. They bought it and they're distributing 3 each month for their channel. Yeah, in many ways. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Another film I was thinking about in terms of resistance against, oppressive family relations, and this is something that is not really talked about much anymore, but this was a character that was very much a cause célèbre of the French surrealist Violette Nozière. And this was made into a film called Violette by Claude Chabrol. And it was Isabelle Huppert's first real acting appearance. She's wonderful in this. It's the same time that Truffaut, the story of Adele H. Isabelle Adjani. But Isabelle Huppert is magnificent, and this is her first major role. And Violette Nazier grew up in a very oppressive family. She killed both of her parents. Of course,
Ooh.
Breton and others take this up as a cause célèbre, right? Right, typical French thing, right? And this was made into a movie, and it's wonderful the play of light when she's in prison, what he does with it. Going back to your relationship earlier, talking about um, um, what was the film you mentioned earlier, Beryl? I'm sorry. I was thinking of the Alice of
Oh, and of the Indies.
and of the Indians, right. So wonderful. This is a wonderful kind of play upon somewhat of the light, the use of light in that film. Yeah,
Mhm.
very good. Yeah. So yeah, in a way, there's one of the philosophers who Stiegler was close to, wrote a piece. Grenell, who's actually started the dialogue with him in France, and he has his own press called the Trans-European Press. He wrote a very interesting piece for the Graduate Faculty Journal in Philosophy for the New School called "The 30s Are Before Us." And this is not a bad time to go back and review in my things, especially in film, right? Or I mean, I would start with Metropolis, go through M, Dr. Mabuse, the von Sternberg masterpieces as well, the migration into Pacific Palisades at the same time, but really to look at this in terms of what was going on culturally during this period, and of course the Depression, right? The Great Depression and how this was affecting things and what was going on in the writing scene. So anyway, I'm just kind of thinking about this right now. I've been I reviewed for my friend here in Montreal much of Duke Ellington's big band stuff, and it's kind of interesting. His early performances, back in that period were much more meant to entertain, right?
Yeah.
During this period, whereas they become much more sophisticated later. Yeah, kind of interesting that the audience shifts, but in the 30s, it's meant to entertain. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah. So I like this thing. We should form a pirate culture. Another book that I like very much is I always forget his name. Peter Lamborn Wilson. Hakeem Bey is his AKA is his nom de guerre. Hakeem Bey, Ontological Anarchy, but the book is called Pirate Utopia, which is a very interesting attempt to look at the early formations of utopic structures in Rabat in particular, outside Morocco, in Morocco, etc. The early pirate culture that was developed and how this works. I think the Somali pirates, nobody really talks about them anymore, but they were pretty damn good in terms of success in hitting ships, right? And redistribution. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. So, yeah. So Kant and the Somalians. I'm just thinking of titles for essays. Yeah, yeah. The Somali pirates, because they were really into redistribution, not human rights, but commodity distribution, redistribution. Right? Yeah. So, yeah, good. All right. Well, but any thoughts about the book? I mean, that struck you. I mean, again, I know it's a kind of, it's an interesting read and fun, but I think this whole topic again of criminalization is worthy of engaging. Beyond that, how care itself becomes
Yeah,
criminalized.
becomes
Yeah, yeah.
criminalized.
This is
Yeah.
really the point here. How can we form a community that decriminalizes care? Yeah, yeah. How do we decriminalize care? Yeah, in a way. Right.
Well, it starts with the commodification of care.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah, Bruno mentioned this book. It's a good book, by the way. I took a look at it. Care, the Highest Stage of Imperialism. See if I can find the whole title for you. Yeah, which is another. You missed your friend last week, Leslie. Bruno was very good. We had a good time. Yeah, I'm
I
sorry.
am so sorry about that. I just couldn't believe my bad timing. I really wanted to be there. I'm sorry.
Okay, okay, that's all right.
But very happy that
He
you
missed you
started this.
though. He said he was looking forward to seeing you. So
I
we'll try to
know.
get him on that camera again. Yeah, soon.
Yeah. Hopefully not just for me, because I'm sure it was good
He
for
was
others
very
as well.
struck today. He called me to tell me about a beautiful, warm letter that Jeremy, I'm just sharing some, internal stuff that Jeremy sent him. And he was absolutely taken by that. Bruno's the kind of person that really has this kind of extremely human capacity for receiving and giving. He's really exemplary in this thing. I mean, to
Absolutely.
me, he's too humanistic, but that's okay. On his book, Humanity and the Enemy, I wrote him a very favorable blurb and review. So, Anyway, but yeah, you missed him last week. Let me see this book he mentioned, because this could be something for anybody that wants to do research on this. I mean, the idea here, once again, is care as power, care as being as decriminalizing care as part of this, of course. Care, and again, in the Heideggerian sense, is the call of conscience, something we've lost completely in many ways. The call of conscience, right? And care is really being for Heidegger, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. In the sense, and of course, then Stiegler, it's very much in terms of it's saving power, like saving the phenomena, if you will, of the human. What does it mean to be human? And this taking care of generations. But yes, Phil, you're right about commodification, and this is what this person does in their book. Let me just get the title for you. I think it's called "Care: The Highest Stage of Imperialism." Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll give you the author in a second. Yeah, it's uh, Pramila Nadison, PremillanaDasen, right? And this is a study, who cares for the care workers, right? Playing on Kite in some ways, right? And she has an interview about this, by the way, too, that you can watch on YouTube. Their book talks with her. Yeah. So Priscilla Nathanson, Care: The Highest State of Imperialism, stage of imperialism. About how it becomes an industry. It becomes no longer. I'm reminded of the opening scene, and forgive my sexism here, but I think it's very funny. Of Landman. I don't know if you've ever seen this with, it's about the oil workers in Texas. I've just seen a few of them, but I saw this I remember very well. So his father, an old man, is not reacting to any of the doctor's treatment, can't stand him at all, et cetera. They keep saying you need a caregiver and all of this. So the oil people, and this is the way they think, goes to a strip club, offers a stripper a lot of money. Will you act like a physical therapist for my father? So he hires this person who comes in and actually is able to get, quote unquote, this guy going again. There's no sex or anything like it. In fact, he asked, we're going to date. Oh, no, no, no. I'm just here as your physical therapist. I'm just to get you going again, No, only imaginary mojo, etc. So it's very funny in the sense about how this alternative set of care is very interesting in some ways, right? Yeah, 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 and then the commodification is very important to think about, that the institutional care never cares. There's no such thing in some ways, right? Yeah, 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 in many ways, yeah. So I think we again need to think that through too. Yeah. I mean, one thing good about New Orleans is if you have a little bit of affluence, you're finished without the affluence in a place like New Orleans, although you have good family around you for a way. But there's a relationship that's really created between the caregivers and the people in care, the elderly. It's a very interesting kind of phenomena. And I think this is something that Kate could, actually, see at work and see in her own work too. And I think she's offering, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I think she's really, in some ways, really critiquing the notion of caregiving as an industry, caregiving as an institution, right, et cetera, et cetera. What does it mean to have institutionalized care? Yeah. I mean, it used to be that you could take insurance and go to long-term, mental health hospitals, right? Now, no way. They don't accept it. Everything is in and out, right? If you had, treatment programs were much longer, no longer. Everything is very quick. And this is a turn in the society based on austerity. And my reading here, that you have this austerity that also goes alongside the return of behaviorism, or what's called dialectical behavioral therapy, supposed to change your behaviors, right? And then cognitive, therapy too. Yeah, CBT. Yeah. So these are things that to me fit very much in this commodification of care,
Mhm.
and psychoanalysis, and particularly existential psychoanalysis, and these kind of much more high-powered things are completely relegated. Psychoanalysis is coming back into style in a certain way, but it's coming back into style for people that are very, very wealthy, right?
Yeah.
It's not a movement as Freud and others have had of the free patient clinics. Certainly not in Fanon sense, which we'll discuss in CASAS actively. I'm looking forward to that discussion. And so yeah, so you have to again think about this too. Freud was not taken to the ghetto. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, Marx may have been, but Freud was hardly ever taken to the ghetto, and maybe there's some reasoning behind that, in some ways. Yeah. So, um, and again, yeah, I want to, kind of position this too, because during the 50s, this was the medicalization of psychoanalysis post World War II. It became the medical model, no longer the model that Freud had in mind. Yeah, yeah. So I think this is, again, something very important to remember culturally as a cultural manifestation. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think we're headed into AI
Well, yeah,
psychoanalysis.
that's the problem. AI and the
Oh,
unconscious. Yeah, we're going to have a session on that,
yep.
on AI and the unconscious. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Freud said that we're three impossible professions. Is being a practice, governing and teaching. Those were the three
Mhm.
impossible professions to Freud. Yeah, 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 in many ways. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah. Um, Yeah. So any remarks about park? We don't have to go long. I mean, I really enjoy seeing everybody, and I'm sorry that my muscles are really tired tonight. Yeah, I had to get a car out. I need the car for things to do. I have a rent a car, so I really need, there's been literally it didn't stop snowing here for 3 days, and we were
Wow.
expecting it to stop. They plowed, it was great, but it just came back today. Today was supposed to be clear according to Sunday's forecast, right? Yeah. So, but no, started at 6 a.m. and went all the way till about a half an hour, 45 minutes ago. Yeah, pretty amazing. Yeah, yeah,
And we're in the middle of a atmospheric river, and we're
yeah.
moated. And in the middle of
Mhm.
the night, the vehicle had to be taken to higher ground so that we could get out if necessary. I don't know.
Wow,
I think this climate change is maybe a real thing.
Shit.
that's what a few scientists have told us.
Yeah.
Well, I'm the lady of the lake, you know?
Yeah, the
I
lady.
pick up a sword.
That's a great movie, by the way.
Yes.
Lancelot de Lac, the Lady of the Lake. I like that rewriting of Lancelot de Lac. That's very nice. Yeah, yeah,
Good.
yeah, 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 yeah. But anyway, yeah, please. Who was going to say something? I'm sorry. With someone, I was just wondering. I mean, are you open to maybe doing something on existential
Oh, yeah.
psychoanalysis and desire? I know we did Anti-Oedipus, we did Overcoming Servitude a few years ago, a couple of years ago, and David Savage was there, and Jane almost. But anyway, I really kind of want to do this in a sense because I think that, unless we have a community, again, this is part of an overarching framework around the question of care, right? If Heidegger is right, if you work with that premise that, care is being, right, in a
Mhm.
sense, and being in the world, it's this mid-sign of the being with that is very important to be fleshed out. Yeah. And how do we do this in a therapeutic way, right? Where there's not only respect for the other, but there's also real care, right? In a sense. Yeah. And I think that going back to some of the fundamental texts, I'll think about this actively. I mean, the more I read of Fanon's practices. He
Mm,
created free clinics. Very
mm,
interesting. Maybe we could talk about Fanon as a clinician, not only as a revolutionary, right?
mm,
And what it means. Yeah, Jeremy, please. Yeah.
Like I don't know, like 10 plus years ago,
Yep.
there was this huge book of Fanon's uncollected writings.
Yes.
It was tripart. It was like his plays, unpublished
Right.
political paper, and then unpublished psychoanalytic papers. They broke them up into three paperbacks, afford
Right.
like really cheap, and you can get a whole volume just on his unpublished psychoanalytic writing,
Right. Right.
and it's like less than $20. So
Okay.
it's
I mean,
pretty
I'm
cool.
going to peruse and search as much as I can to find very good clinical practice there. I want people to remember, and again, I'm not trying to privilege just French philosophy here, but Fanon was educated by Merleau-Ponty, Jean
mm,
Cocteau, Jean-Paul Sartre. He had pretty good masters, right? As well as other people in the clinics. Jacques Lacan's Mirror Stage, very important to him, which was a redoing of Henri Wallon's Mirror Stage. So, I mean, maybe we can do that. Maybe I can thematize it. I'll talk to you guys about it when I'm trying to plan it out, in a way. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to record the sessions with Josh and myself, and
mm,
I'm sure Jeremy will contribute to those sessions in Greece this summer, on the anti-Oedipus, anti-psychiatry movement, because there's a lot of interesting takes on this, going forward. Vis-a-vis questions of authority, obedience to authority, right? What is an authority, right? Again,
mm.
who is the author of something? What is happening to? Oh, you put them in. Okay, great. Oh, yeah, I know this book. Yeah, great. Thank you, Jeremy. That's great.
Literally like $20, and it's
Yeah,
big
right.
too. It's like a few hundred pages.
Yeah, 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 yeah. A monster died at 36 years old. Yeah, yeah, yeah. In Washington, D.C.
I also just wanted to say, I mean, you guys are probably, some of you are probably really familiar with this book already, but I just think it's so good. Peter Linebaugh and Marcus Rediker, The
Yeah.
Many-Headed Hydra on the Atlantic Working Class. There are a
Yes,
lot of pirates in that book.
yes, absolutely. I mentioned it kind of peripherally tonight.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. Yeah,
a classic text.
Yeah.
it's a classic
I
thing.
figured you guys knew. I just
Yeah,
didn't.
yeah, classic. Yeah. So if you want, yeah, the notion of the pirate, very important here to go forward. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But again, they don't really go into criminalization to the degree that is now being articulated, especially by these people and a few others, right? And this to me interests me very much because this is going on from Homeland Security to FBI to Justice Department, et cetera, how the criminalization is working. All of a sudden, the guy that's, what's his name, Kelly from Arizona, is a criminal because he dared to confront the U.S. Military's policies and
Mm.
peek against it. He's sued, by the way, the Department of Defense today. Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is the greatest comedy of errors, but a very
Yeah.
serious tragedy that's going on in the United States right now.
Mm.
It's unbelievable it's come to this. Yeah,
Hey, Larry Krasner, who in Philadelphia, the DA, who I was
yeah.
hopeful for, but then disillusioned because of his stance vis-a-vis Mumia, but still giving credit where credit is due. Krasner and the sheriff of Philadelphia came on TV yesterday, and they took it to the level which I've been saying, like which I hoped. They said if ICE comes massed into Philadelphia, they will be arrested on site. Period. End
Finally,
of story.
finally, we got people
So
saying,
yeah, that's the
Mm.
first gauntlet as far as using the repressive state apparatus against ICE, which I feel like people should have done. But of course, it's in Philadelphia because that place is hyper violent, amazing, blue collar scape of crazy. But yeah, they said a sight scene. If they come masked up, they're going to get arrested on site.
okay,
So I'm really interested, and it didn't seem like they were selling wolf tickets or being hyperbolic. They seemed very serious about that.
That's good. Maybe they were reacting to the Philadelphia the Eagles loss in the football game,
Yeah.
right? Which was a big blow to the defending Super Bowl champions, right? Right, in many ways. But yeah, Philly's known for that too. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's also on social media Black Panthers confronting ICE um, um, drivers in vans and telling them to get the hell out. And how can you do this to your own people? Because they're the people working for ICE are black, and anyway, it's very powerful to see this. And I haven't heard anybody talking about Black Panthers for a long time. I don't know if it's real or whatever, but it seemed like it.
Yeah, I saw that, and they were armed.
Mm.
They were carrying rifles.
Because you're allowed to.
Right.
Well, we shall see. We'll see what Mondami does in New York. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, we have many demonstrations, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this woman's crazy, this Christy Noam, to put it
Oh,
mildly. I mean, she doesn't learn. I mean, she's completely off the wall. I mean, the things that come out of her mouth are very, I mean,
Mm.
the dog killing was just the beginning,
Mm.
right? Back in the day. Yeah. I mean, she says for every one, ICE person you kill, there'll be all of you, right? She
Mm.
said this, right? Yeah, this is coming from a figure high up in the government in terms of our homeland security. What does this mean? Right, in a sense. Right. So, yeah,
Well, it's a call for open warfare.
indeed.
Mm.
Civil
Mm.
war. Yep, yep,
Civil
absolutely.
War.
Yeah, yeah. So we're gonna have that problem. So I'll work on the Jolly Roger, the ship. We can get to go way out in international waters and yeah. 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 That's one of the problems in Casas. We only have the boat that comes 3 days a week, Jeremy. We don't really have much of a boating culture there, in a way. So we'd be stranded there. Right. Yeah. So. Yeah, good. Okay, well, I'll send out an email. I would like to go back, like I said, to Stiegler just for a little while. Maybe I'll comb. Maybe we can read a little bit more in the Pirate Care. I'll comb it for crucial passages that I see. I think this is a very interesting notion. This whole process of criminalization, how it works, how it's ideated and then put into practice is very interesting. And how this is fun and people actually believe it, right? Yeah, yeah. Despite Mick Jagger and sympathy for the devil, right? Despite many, many moments, from Mephistopheles forward. But anyway, yeah, despite all of this, very, very interesting. And I'll see, I mean, I think that the Crime and Punishment is in a book, the Otto Kirchheimer, the lectures at Columbia in the 1930s, which was the starting point for Foucault's discipline and punish. Let me just see something. I want to see if it's available. I think Neumann was with him. I think it was Kirchheimer and Neumann.
mm.
Let me just see. I think it's in print. Yeah. He died very young, unfortunately. Yeah. He did a book, Secret Reports on Nazi Germany, by the way, and a very good book on political justice. But this was done with, I think, Franz Neumann as well too. Kirchheimer after Schmidt. This was what was called left Carl Schmittianism. Yeah, in a way. Yeah, yeah. Um, do you guys know? Do you know? Do you know Otto Kirchheimer from the Frankfurt School?
Yeah.
One of the peripheral. Yeah. He wrote a book with Franz Neumann, who wrote Behemoth, right? Yeah, they
Mhm.
taught a course in criminal law, and I think it was called Crime and Punishment. Obviously the play on the Dostoevsky novel.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and in the 1930s, and very, very well known series of lectures, at least in some political legal theories, and they were considered at the time left Schmittians, Carl Schmitt to the left, right?
Mhm.
To and he studied internal mechanisms in Nazi Germany in terms of their policing and their practices. It's a very interesting man. Died very early though. Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
called Social Democracy and the Rule of Law, and it was reissued by Routledge.
This is the one with co-authored with Neumann, or just
Otto Kirchheimer and Franz Neumann.
okay, good. Yes, okay. It was a
There's two
class called
titles. One is the Rule of Law, Political Theory, and the Legal System in Modern Society, and the other is Social Democracy and the Rule of Law.
right. That's right.
I'm not sure if that's a separate book.
I think it was two parts of the course. The course was called Crime and Punishment.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
that was given at Columbia as a series of lectures. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this was before Adorno was at the Princeton Radio Project, beginning his studies with Lazarsfeld and other things. And Mann and Brecht and others were in Pacific Palisades during this time. But the New York people were Kirchheimer, Neumann. Marcuse lived in the Bronx for a while too. Yeah, 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 yeah. I heard a story how Marcuse and Neumann, Marcuse married Neumann's wife, after he died. And anyway, they used to walk on Sundays. They used to have great talks and laughter about how Americans do their Sunday best dressing. So they would have this commentary. They would take long walks and discuss the American notion of the Sunday best. And these were, in some ways, snobs, but they had a great sense of humor about this, yeah, in a way. And very important in Hollywood. People forget, Billy Wilder is a genius.
Oh.
I mean, a genius when you really think about, the kind of work he did. Von Sternberg, when he came here, of course, Fritz Lang. He left Germany after he's told by Goebbels, you can be the head of cinema. Can you imagine that most Americans wouldn't even get near, oh, yes, please, please, let me bow down to the Fuhrer, right? Lang left the country, he knew it was over then, right? Right? Yeah, 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 yeah. So, yeah, I mean, pretty amazing. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, yeah. So very, very important to think about. Again, I mentioned again this Blossom Shanghai that Patrick and I have indulged in. I don't know how many episodes are you in, Patrick? Are
I
you
think I'm about into 4 so
okay?
far.
Yeah, that's where I am too. Okay, I
But
got
but
I
but
have
I looked at his movies before, and I just kind of dabbled in this one. And I hesitate to get it to watch a series because I can't help myself. I binge.
well, I
I want to
do
get,
too. I mean, we all.
it's like
I guess some of
anyway.
you were present when I brought my friend Dennis Bro, who wrote a book called The Birth of the Binge. Yeah, who studies
Yeah,
this actively, who has a very addictive personality. Dennis is
yeah.
a member of every anonymous out there. But anyway, the binge he knows very well. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I did too. I mean, The Wire. Everybody was
Mhm.
talking about The Wire back in the day. I remember this vividly. It was for me. I started hearing about The Wire. I couldn't take it anymore, so I go to New Orleans. I don't have cable TV in New York. I go to visit a cousin of mine. I stay at his place. He's got every cable station you want, every subscriber thing going. I put on The Wire. I literally, in 3.5 days, caught
Yeah.
up to the fourth year. I must have seen 45 hours of The Wire in 3 days. Yeah.
Oh,
And I still can remember. And then I came back and I did the subscription and finished the final season, which I thought was not the best, the worst season,
no.
the second part of the fifth season. But anyway, I binged like crazy. So I go crazy on this stuff. Slow Horses took 2 weeks to do, 30
Yeah.
episodes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I thought that was excellent. Yeah. 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 Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. But yeah, it's long. Yeah. But in the mood, how many have you seen in the Mood for Love? I mean, it's a beautiful
Mhm.
romantic masterpiece. Yeah. Yeah. I
His
mean,
his films are gorgeous in
yes, they
terms
are.
of they're just
Yeah. It
yeah.
reminds me of Duke Ellington and Strayhorn's Lush Life, that he
Mhm.
actually captures this on celluloid. You know,
Yeah.
yes, the rhythm of everyday life down to a science, right? Very, very well. Yeah.
He may in fact have used that in the film. I don't know,
He
but he uses music very
yes, he
well.
does very well.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So he's
did you
one of
see
the,
did you
which
see
one?
Treme?
I
Oh,
did.
that's
For me, yeah, for me,
yeah.
yes, I have feelings about
A
that.
native?
Sorry,
Yeah, of
sorry
course.
for that, but yes, I mean,
Yeah.
I like part of it, and
I could never get into it, but anyway, it's
I don't blame you. I'm glad
yeah,
you said that. I mean, some people really like it, etc. Having grown up there, knowing some of the musicians and some of the cultures, I think the Yale script writers really missed a lot. I got in
yeah.
a fight at the pianist John Cleary's house with some of the a verbal fight with some of the script writers about Treme because they were all there during the filming and writing and thinking they knew New Orleans. I don't think it was internal. The good thing about The Wire is David Simon actually lived in Baltimore. He actually was a reporter for the
Mm,
Baltimore Sun during a
Yeah.
very
yeah.
difficult period in Baltimore. I was in Baltimore during the 70s. Yeah, it's a rough place, still is, but really rough back then. I mean, in
Mm,
many ways, and the Avon Boxdales, very, very active, the Marlows, these characters in there, they're very real to me,
mm,
having lived through the William Donald Schaefer period before Kurt Schmoke and others took office, right? They're very, very, yeah, yeah, yeah. So, yeah. No, I love The Wire. I thought it basically broke open TV. There'll never be another series as good. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And Beryl, speaking earlier, you were speaking of housing projects and building and urban renewal. There's
yeah.
a great sequence in The Wire with Brother Mouzon and his sidekick, and he's watching
Yes.
buildings come down. And he
Yes.
asked Brother Mouzon, what is this? Lamar was the name of the sidekick. That's what they call urban renewal, Lamar.
Renewal.
Yeah,
Yes.
and then of course everybody started
Yeah.
urban removal.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, I love Brother Mouzon as a character. Yeah, another guy.
Yeah. That's a great series.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I knew a lot of, but Treme, they didn't have the same feeling about.
No, that's true.
And also remember that The Wire had 4 or 5 excellent writers, including Dennis Lehane, George Pelicanos, right? Many, many people that were, first-rate writers who they farmed out to write episodes, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the Greek
Mm,
wasn't a Greek. That's kind of interesting in the second season. The drug dealers in the port,
mhm.
right? That was kind of funny too. Yeah, yeah. I love the section on the schools, and I think should be in the beginning of every class
Mm.
when you teach. You should say, as they say on The Wire, when the Columbia University experts went to study or school or Johns Hopkins, and they would bring in all the specialists to the high schools. After the fifth or sixth time, the kids would say, "Oh, you're here to study the study of the study of the study." And this tells you everything about schooling in America, right
Yeah.
there. I
Yeah.
thought that was fantastic. Yeah, yeah. So anyway, yeah. Okay. Well, okay. So I'm gonna make Jeremy. I want to say this. I'm gonna really push for us. You know, um, um, recording some of the sessions in Casas. It doesn't have to be all of them, and people can do that. But I think the one on the desire called Revolution, which I'll be doing, should be taped. Yeah, yeah, in a way. Yeah. And you're doing Walter Rodney, which is going to be great. Yeah, yeah, which is very new. Yeah, for us. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So anyway, so how about we meet? Would it be okay to meet in 2 weeks?
2 weeks
If
would
I
be
can get
great.
my feet wet back in New York, if I can. Yeah, if you don't mind. I'm going to be, yeah, I'm looking forward to the warmth of the city. But next week, I'm going to be on the road. I'm going to be going down there. So yeah,
Are you
but
guys going back to Tuesdays or sticking with Mondays?
what did you say?
Are you sticking with Mondays or going
I
back
am.
to?
Is that good for you?
No, but it's okay.
Well,
I
is
am.
Tuesday better? Is Tuesday
Yeah,
better?
yeah, but that's fine. Do you guys? I'll make it work. I'm teaching Monday nights till late, but that's fine.
Okay. The problem with me is that I've got a class on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays in the
Yeah.
evening, right?
No,
I
it's
mean,
okay. I'll check you guys online after. It's okay.
could do it Wednesday, I mean,
Oh
we
no,
could,
don't worry about it. I
yeah,
just wanted to know. It's all
but it'd
good.
be Monday, which would be the 26th. You don't teach on the 26th, do you?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, that's the first day of classes?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm
But
Tuesday.
anyway, it was great seeing you all, and hopefully in classes
Okay.
in the yeah,
And I
Okay.
really appreciate this time period.
yeah,
This is
yeah,
much
yeah.
better for me.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you very
We're
much.
going to get Jeremy to talk to the CUNY people because it'd be great to have his presence on some. Yeah, yeah. I mean, after all, he's almost a distinguished professor. He's a full professor, but he's not distinguished yet. Yeah.
Jenner, pirate professor.
A pirate, but that's me. That now you got it. Yeah, yeah,
All
indeed.
these lunatics on my block fly the American flag in front of the house. And, I get
Oh,
along with
wow.
the right wingers on my street. I'm not trying to say that. But independent of that aspect of that signifier, I was always like, what the hell? Because when you're a kid, like growing up in northern New Jersey, it's schools and the post office. And I'm like, it's not, you don't live in the post office. You
No.
don't, your house is in the element. Why are you flying? So while you guys were talking, I ordered a Jolly Roger flag and I'm going to hang it in my house.
Oh, good, good. Yeah, yeah, it's here. It's on the. You need this image too. You've seen the cover of Women's Pirates, right?
Yeah.
Put that on the back of the
No,
document.
I can't do
I'm
that.
just teasing.
Too much.
I'm in one of my. Yeah.
But I'm gonna hang the pirate flag and see what happens.
See what happens. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And Caroline, when do you go back to teaching? Are you back yet? No?
Next week,
Next week, Rutgers begins? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Tuesday.
Yeah, CUNY begins the 26th. Yeah, so you begin the week of the 19th.
Yeah.
Is Monday nights okay, or do you have a night
Yes,
schedule?
Monday nights is good for me.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, okay, okay, very good. Okay, yeah, good. All right. Okay, well, thank you, everybody, and we'll pick it up in 2 weeks, and I'll send out some readings too. I think I found a good passage on the therapeutic too, on what I'd like to do with the therapeutic in terms of extending some of the thinking about the notion of what the therapeutikos is, right, in the Greek language in a way, and again, I kind of half seriously, half jokingly take Kojev seriously when he told Dutschke and Daniel Cohn-Bendit, if you want to be radical, learn ancient Greek, right? So he told that right after May of '68. So it's kind of an interesting moment. Of course, Foucault's in Tunisia, in Tunis, and yeah, right, and all kinds of things going on during that period. Yeah. So yeah, so I look forward to going forward with this, and we can try to integrate as much of what we've done the last year between Stiegler and some of these other readings into the notion of the existential psychoanalytic. What is the role of psychoanalysis today? what is the role of the is there new subjectivities possible, or do we switch the language to individuation? What could that mean? Et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of tendencies out there that have built up over the years. Of course, the reaction to Freud, what was called the revisionist moment in the United States, was Harry Stack Sullivan, the interpersonal relation school. The I, thou of Buber turned into the I, we in terms of personal logical, interpersonal logical relations, etc. Sullivan, wrote many books on this and was very responsible for, I think, influence on many of the high-powered psychiatric hospitals in the States, especially. And of course, there was a group called the Sullivanians, which was a disaster on the left wing, on the Upper West Side. But yeah, we could talk about that. And then, of course, Karen Horney, who was German. She wrote the book Neurosis and Human Growth, etc. But part of that revisionist moment, and Erich Fromm was also considered part of that revisionist moment, too, because of the lack of emphasis, and Patrick would know this, the lack of emphasis on Freud's seminal theories of infantile sexuality, how that was basically kept out of the medical model, right? And in most of the practices of psychoanalysis and the speaking about everything from incest to, infantile sexuality. Yeah. And how important this was to Freud. Yeah. So there's a lot
Yeah,
to go through.
Marcuse was good on that
He
in
was
terms of
good on
dealing
that.
with Fromm. Yeah, the appendix
And
to
Walter
Harrison.
Bade with Fromm. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So this is a very interesting, in some ways, still uncharted seas and how this is, played out in everyday culture. You have to wonder what the perversity is that is going on that's allowing this Trump situation to continue, right? In a sense, not that Biden or the previous Trump or anything like that, but this is really over the top. I mean, it was over the top. It's been for a long time, of course, but this is really outrageous. That you have the president of the United States going around saying, we're going to buy Greenland, we're going to buy, we're going to, Venezuela oil is ours, right? Et cetera. No telling what they want in Somalia, right? Nigeria, we already know. And remember that Condoleezza Rice was on the board of Chevron, who was the biggest player in Nigeria. Yeah. So she was on the board of
I
Chevron.
think they endowed her chair at Stanford.
Condoleezza Rice or
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I believe it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they were the biggest player in Venezuela as well.
Yes,
Hmm.
that's right. That's right. So yeah, the question is, how does a populace get to this point? What kind of repression is really going on? And to use again, going back to Patrick mentioning Marcuse, what kind of surplus repression is circulating out here in some ways, right? And this whole radical, desublimation, right, that is happening, right? This radical in the radical right sense of desublimation, Yeah, I mean, basically, you have the director of Homeland Security dressed up like little Annie Oakley, right? After the hit in Minnesota. You saw this, right? The fringe
Yeah.
outfit. Yeah, she dressed. Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. Yeah, what's going down? It's like the stilettos and the tight, leather pants in front of the Jailhouse Rock in Salvador. Yeah, what is really going down here in terms of libidinal and the spectacle? And yeah, yeah, yeah. So this is
We're all
so
living in a
serious.
reality TV show.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Yeah. Again, I know I've mentioned this a lot. Maybe we will really read Sod, and Juliet or the what is it called, Juliet or the Virtues, Horkheimer and Adorno in 1947. To me, pretty seminal essay for our time. That alongside the genealogy of morals of course, Nietzsche, which I think they take their point of departure from. Yeah, yeah. So how do we get there in some ways, in a way? Yeah. Yeah. So, has anybody read Peter Weiss at all? The Aesthetics of Resistance. Do you know him, Beryl? Yeah.
I my son shared an apartment with the Joel Scott,
Oh, yeah.
who translated the second volume. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Yeah,
Mm.
he's a major figure, kind of forgotten
Yeah.
too, but major. He wrote the play, The Assassination of
Mm.
Murat, performed by
Yeah.
the inmates of the asylum, directed by
Yes.
the
Yes.
Marquis de Sade, was one of his earlier contributions. And then The Aesthetics of Resistance, I think it's 3 volumes.
It's
Yeah,
3 volumes, and
yeah.
I've got the second volume, but I can't access the first.
Oh, you can't get it. Okay. I think it's
No,
available though. You can't
I
get it?
think it is. I probably
Okay.
just haven't looked
Okay.
hard enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I'm putting off reading the one that I've got until
Oh,
I've read
yeah.
the first one.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
Procrastination is my middle name.
Yeah, no, no, I hear you. But anyway, again, going back to strategies of resistance, maybe we can, give this an overarching theme going forward. I mean, one strategy of resistance, as we all know, is the slippage into the aesthetic. This was going on in terms of the 1990s, that political practice as such, political activism, protest, right, demonstration, these kind of things were never enough because the state could absorb it again. So the retreat was into art as a subversion, right? Marcuse proposed this in the aesthetic dimension, but of course everybody ran to read Adorno's aesthetic theory, and then of course the theory of the avant-garde, Peter Berger's work, etc. So this is again a question, because Freud always said, and this is interesting in psychoanalysis, and I think, of course, Lacan would agree with this. Before the artists and the poets, we have to lay down our arms, right? In a way, that there's something that's going on there in terms of the aesthetic realm, right? That is always already there. So, yeah, I mean, that's a question. What role does this play in terms of the therapeutic? What role does it play in terms of the building of communities of care? And again, this aesthetics of resistance. I mean, for example, Jean-Francois Lyotard, who I respect very much as a philosopher, he tried to get away from Marx and Freud. He wrote a book, called Driftworks, in English, but I think it's departing from Marx and Freud, or downriver with Marx and Freud. He basically would go back to the aesthetics of Kant, and the aesthetics of course, to a degree Hegel, but really the Kantian critique of judgment as a fundamental point. And he wrote about this actively on the notion of the sublime. And again, this is again we're taking on a lot, but at the same time, I think it's important. Is resistance just as active in the art world? Can it be, or is this something that is now passe, or something that's misguided in a way? Because, again, what do you do in a police state, right? Yeah, yeah. What do you do in this kind of environment? And where are the levels of the resistance to this? And anyway, I was just coming up with some etymological stuff that homo. I was thinking about this too in terms of Kant and the critique of judgment. That what did I do with it? I wrote it down on a piece of paper. I like. Yeah. So you have the notion of um, the Homo sapiens, man is the wise, but sapio in Latin means the man of taste, right? In some ways.
Mm.
So of course Kant spends many times on the many pages, if you will, on taste versus judgment in the critique of judgment. Yeah, in many ways. So yeah. So let me just tell you what I tried to do here. So sapiens comes from sagio, which is the man who has taste. The sapio, he who tastes well, etc. But Sisyphus right? As I said, the myth of Sisyphus, Sisyphos, is the man of the keenest taste in some ways. So it's kind of interesting. The myth of Sisyphus at its bottom etymologically is the man of the keenest taste. So you have this going on in Kant in some ways, happening. So I'm trying to frame this under wisdom tasting, right? In a sense, wisdom is taste, the sage is taste. The sapiens as a question of taste. So anyway, just some thoughts going forward in many ways. But the slippage to the aesthetic, I remember very well, happened. This is what Habermas argued against. For those of you that were around, was against the slippage by the French into the aesthetic and by the Frankfurt School, and he came up with the book, of course, is called The Theory of Communicative Action. Right? The 2 volumes that came out with Habermas, which was an attempt to basically, in my opinion, neutralize and normalize any possible subversion. To my mind, yeah, that's the way I read it. Yeah.
And he really aimed it against Marcuse and Benjamin.
Yes, he did.
Those 2 people, which have that kind of sense, that aesthetic dimension to them.
Right.
Yeah.
You know that Marcuse died at Habermas's house. The joke is, of course, he poisoned him, but anyway, I don't think he did.
Well, he did in a sense.
Yes, he did. No, people didn't read Marcuse that seriously after that. Marcuse became more associated with Angela Davis than he did with his own thinking. Yeah. His book on historicity is a masterpiece. Reason and Evolution. The note on dialectic is one of the best introductions to the dialectic. 5 pages in the book Reason and Revolution. Yeah, that to me is a great, great moment in terms of dialectical thinking. And then, of course, Eros and Civilization that we all know, one-dimensional man, right? And then, of course, Revolution and Counter-Revolution, and Revolt, Counter-Revolution and Revolt, his essays, the essays and negations, right? Etc. From Luther to Popper, the whole section of subjectivity and how neoliberalism absorbed it, Popperian liberalism. So this is a very long, thing in a way. And I think that part of the problem is social media in some ways has so many codes going on, and it forgets that a lot of this stuff has been rehearsed, right? It has already been out there, right? And this is a question, again, of tertiary retention. It's a question, again, historical memory and being able to reconstruct that and saying, are we really that far away from those debates at this, right? Or that obsolete, right, in some ways. But anyway, yeah, just another thing. But yeah, I don't like Habermas. I like the Habermas of legitimization crisis and knowledge and human interests, the early moments of Habermas. He was still under the influence of the Frankfurt School. Then after that, it was gone. Yeah.
I think he got shocked by the left, the new left.
He did.
And that explains the kind of rightward turn. Maybe not right, but I mean it's.
Yeah, no, a normalized, normalization turn, I would call it. Right?
Yeah. Can't we just get along?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's like Sly Stone, everyday people, that kind of right. Yeah. So yeah. But anyway, this was a very, very interesting period in a sense, and maybe we could, try to situate within that the psychoanalytic and what happened there too. I mean, Patrick, you're certainly aware of the turf wars that took place after John and Malcolm produced in the Freud archives, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But there's one character in that period of time that really has been lost sight of is Alfred Lawrencer. He's always been grouped. He's always been grouped. None of it's been translated.
I have something.
I've done my own translations of his work, but his work has always been identified with Habermas.
I think I have them on the desk here, or at least some. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you even the book by not Schmidt. What's his name?
Schneider.
He he even doesn't do Lawrence justice.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, you can add that to the discussion then. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people don't give Kurt Goldstein his due either on the mechanism, this great book he wrote too, that both Sartre and Merleau-Ponty criticized. People forget, Merleau-Ponty started with an attack on behaviorism. Structure of behavior is really basically a very frontal attack on Watson and Skinner in many ways in the name of consciousness. And he goes on then to the phenomenology of perception, which is still considered his masterpiece. And then the late working notes. And the same thing with Sartre. Sartre wrote, in my estimation, Being in Nothingness was not only just a philosophical contribution, but really was an attack on the incompetency of the French psychoanalytic scene. Not Lacan, but the Marie Bonaparte factions, etc., how much it had failed in its project. Yeah, in a way. So you have all these kind of, things that are materializing in the 40s and the early 50s. Very, very important. Yeah. And I think that, I know we did critique of dialectical reason, some of us here, again, Sartre is a very forgotten thinker, right, in many ways, and writer, but he did open up territory for so much, and in many ways. I mean, he opened up psychoanalytic studies in a very different way of artists. He did one of Genet, Mallarmé, right, Baudelaire, right, and of course, the late masterpiece that no one's taken up in literary theory, The Idiot of the Family, Flaubert, which is 2,800 pages. 700 pages just on Flaubert's genetic constitution and childhood, using language of Husserl. But yeah, Lorenzer's interesting. You're right. Schneider doesn't give him, enough credit, right?
Well, it's the last chapter, and
yeah,
essentially, yeah.
So this is a book worth rereading, though, I think too. Yeah. He goes against the Frankfurt School too here, by the way. Yeah. He calls the making conscious. He calls the recreation of the fissured language game. This is Lorenzo, called the unconscious, the making conscious of the unconscious. He said it was the recreation of the fissured language game. I guess
split off language game is the way it gets translated.
Right.
In Knowledge and Human Interest, Habermas has a whole chapter, or 2 chapters actually, about it, which Lorenzer takes apart in his writing, his interpretation. But anyway, this is
No, thank you. No, thank you for mentioning him. He's not well known in the United States, as you know, because
he was leading studies, groups on trying to grapple with Lacan in Germany.
Yes,
this was back in the 60s.
Yes.
And some of the stuff has been some of the papers that came out of those discussions have been published. So
very interesting. Sam Weber mentioned that, by the way. Yeah, that about Lorenzer. Sam Weber's writings on Lacan, basically were circulating in kind of pirated form throughout Germany in the 70s. The Legend of Freud, and also then the book of on Lacan that he wrote. Came out later. But Lorenzo, as a figure. Why don't you want to publish some of those, or yeah.
Well, what do you want?
Yeah, you have translations.
Tell me what you want. I probably have it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that.
This is this was going to be my doctoral dissertation, but I never.
Well, it's okay. It's not too late.
Getting work didn't look possible, so I gave it up. Yeah.
Yeah. No, great. No, that's great. Yeah. The symbolic concepts becomes for Lorenzer a passé partout, which accomplishes true marvels wherever Marxism does not appear to have the key for an understanding for psychoanalysis. This is Schneider speaking. The chief function of this concept is it allows one to conduct a Janus-like, or better, a social partnership-like politic in the relationship of historical materialism and psychoanalysis. Work and interaction appeal like cooperative tandem values behind the highness of the symbolic concept. Lorenzer states, symbols as elements of language and language as discourse and action point to communication and work in the same manner. The symbol here is not only the Platonic precursor of work, but in that self-created means of production of the subject of the species, symbol is synthesis analogous to material production because always rooted in inner nature, from which the symbolist product has been wrested as well as in conflict with outer nature from which the collective tangible product goes forth. The concept of the symbol. No, this is very interesting. I'd be very interested to see what you have, if you want. We can talk about that. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe we can get it into either a situations article, a new translation, or introducing Lorenza, or maybe we can even get Iris Books to maybe take on something. Yeah, be
Okay.
very interesting to do that, right? Yeah. Linguistic capacity for symbolization. If you remember, Stiegler says one of the problems today of the fissured subject, if I could use that language, or the split subject in Lacanian categories, is that it does not have the capacity to make symbols anymore. Symbol making is gone, right? Yeah. This is very interesting, this notion of the symbol. And then, of course, symbolic action. And to me, this fits very nicely, if you will, or at least has some correlative movement in Kenneth Burke's work. The literary, the poet, and Marxist of the time. The father of Eleanor Leacock, the anthropologist who translated The Origin of the Family, Private Property in the State with a wonderful introduction. Yeah. So, yeah. So there's a lot to be done. Yeah, around the notion of symbol and how it's different for, say, a Lorenzer, a Leotard who actually takes up language games in the postmodern condition, right? Of course, this is coming from Wittgenstein, but also you could certainly put Saussure in there, and then this connection, if you will, to Lacan's symbolic order. What does this ultimately mean in psychoanalytic parlance? And then what does symbolic intention really mean too? Yeah, and how does basically Habermas take this up? The problem with Habermas in communication and communicative action, theory of communicative action, is that he has a very moral view of psychoanalysis, right? Yes. It's a very, very tinged with morality, the people that he goes to as the analysts who's taking on. But yeah. So yeah. No, I'm glad you mentioned this guy. I mean, I had it on my desk because this is a book I suggested for, again, CASA on psychoanalysis and Marxism this summer. So yeah. It's called Neurosis and Civilization. Michael Schneider is his name. There's some excellent videos of him. Never became really well known in the States. This was Seabury Press, published this, I think, 1973. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got it right here.
Yeah, that's the cover. Mark employed the heads. So,
Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
No, I've read it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great book. I mean, it's a great.
Oh yeah, it's a good book. I mean, in terms of
literally in German, it's neurosis and class struggle, not neurosis and civilization. So he was the real deal, right?
Yeah.
And I think a member of the German SDS, right? He was part of the student movement. Yeah, there. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, neurosis and class struggle. Yeah. Just to give you an idea, thank you, Patrick. The Stalinist show trial of psychoanalysis versus. I mean, this guy's really clever, and just some of the things. The methodological difficulties of psychoanalysis, Freud's psychology of conflict and dialectical logic, the unconscious subversion of reified consciousness, he's read his Lukács, the sociological substance of psychoanalysis, and the critical substance of psychoanalysis. And then he goes on Stalinism and Freudo-Marxism, Stalinist resistance, right? Um, Economic reduction in the Stalinist concept of ideology, Reich's revolutionary question, the split between being and consciousness, and then the naturalistic misunderstanding of Marxism. Those are the very profound work. This is real thinking in my thing. And then with Marx against the bourgeois ideology of psychoanalysis is the next thing, right? Yeah. The ambivalence of Freud's theory, the class situation of the analyst, and then part three is the utilization of capital and psychic impoverishment. We talk about symbolic misery today, mass hysteria, all these things, AI generated stupidity, systemic stupidity. Well, we go back into here, psychic impoverishment. This is 1973. This is nothing new to us, in some ways, after reading this book, right? Yeah. And then consumer society, it goes through many things about the commodity. Yeah. So this is the next one. Yeah. Chiarina Cordella, who, Leslie, did you meet Chiarina? You met Chiarina, right? The Greek one?
She's another one. She is great.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've read her stuff.
Yeah. Good. Good. I'll tell her. Come to Casa, Patrick. You can talk to her every day over a glass of wine. It starts about 3 o'clock. She's ready. 3 o'clock. Sit down, Patrick. Get down. Right? Yeah, anyway. Yeah. Yeah. So she'll be there. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, she is great. She knows Michael Schneider's work, one of the few in academia. But that's because of New German critique. That's not because of psychoanalysis or meta attempts at meta psychology or philosophy. It's because of New German critique was very attuned to people such as Schneider, right? They published one of his essays from this book, I think, early on.
Yeah.
1973, I think. Yeah, they published an essay, one of their first editions. Yeah. Great journal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jack Zipes. Yeah. 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 That's Beryl knows Jack Zipes. Yeah. Great figure on the fairy tale, and got a lot of people.
Yeah.
We used to read them to our daughter.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. All right, good. So we covered a lot of another aerial view of the transcendental egos at work here, looking over this stuff. So yeah. So yeah, let's do 2 weeks. I'll put out a little program. We can finish up with a part and then maybe go back to a little bit of the Stiegler and then talk about what does care in terms of the therapeutic community, what would care be in terms of the therapeutic as such, right, et cetera. What does this mean today? Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed Bruno. I'm not a big fan of liberal left political attempts like Kite is doing, but I thought it's a very fine and interesting book in a sense, well written and very warmly written and very passionate in a sense. You can kind of feel this from her. Yeah.
I liked Bruno's interpretation of it.
Yes.
He brought out an interesting interpretation.
I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, very much. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay. Well, don't get criminalized this next week. It always happens to me. The union meeting today, and I asked today at the union meeting, it was a contract thing for building proposals. So I asked, well, what is the executive committee thinking about that they don't want to do a negotiating team, even though the negotiations should be being done this year? Why are they waiting to new officer elections to build a negotiating team? I'm wondering how this happened, and why is it that some of the faculty, maybe a good part of the faculty, doesn't want a strike authorization vote, which CUNY would die for, not to have a strike authorization vote and the ability to strike. And I was called out that I was trying to find out how people voted in the meeting. I was called out. The victim card was played, on me immediately. The criminal Michael Pelias is asking some very basic questions fundamentally here again. So I know the feeling. I started off early. I was brought in many times to the office, of the principal and other things, and worse than that, of course. But early on in my thing, yeah, yeah. So yeah. Anyway, I see this every day. I mean, what happened in Minnesota is abominable. Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is unconscionable that they outright lie. This is the amazing thing. The outright, not only disavowal and denial, but this kind of consistent, almost patterned lying that's so pathological that somehow if they keep doing this, people will believe them because they come across as assertive, in a sense, right? Yeah.
You wonder how long it can go on. I mean, you have this. I mean, I have this sense that eventually they're going to trip on something and it's going to basically collapse.
Right.
But I don't know.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
They're in Ipswich, a small town. About every week it's been a demonstration against Trump.
Right.
Largely sponsored by the local Democratic Party.
Right.
Which I have nothing but contempt for. But
right. Good for you.
Last Saturday, there were 400, instead of the usual 100, there were 400.
Wow.
Something could be shifting. I don't know.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
We have Mandami, we have socialist or democratic socialist people. Again, please don't put me in that camp, but it is a step, right? A very small step, if you will. A toehold, if you will, or maybe a little baby, baby step into the things. But mayors of Portland, Boston, right? And it looks like Minneapolis, this guy has leans this way. Take a breeze, freeze. Yeah. And of course, New York City, which is the big one, right? In many ways. So we have this going on. There are probably other cases of this, smaller towns as such you're talking about. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's it about hope, right? In a way. Yeah. 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 Many ways. Yeah. Good. Okay. All right. Well, everybody have a good week, and I'll be in touch by email with a little bit of a synopsis and where we go from here. Okay. Thank you for coming. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, Michael.
Okay. Okay. Bye-bye.